implementation and shared governance. It must be ensured that it's based on the principle of the SSC and that the flexibility of this modality is not hindered by the confluence of different cooperation paradigms. Thus, it is necessary to address the triangular cooperation from an egalitarian construction between the parties, which is developed through a political dialogue and institutional coordination that allows the advent of a triangular cooperation with its own characteristics and entity, thus overcoming the traditional notion of same as marginal complement to bilateral cooperation among partner states. Fourth, establishment of a global report about SS&T cooperation. Improving the quality of South-South and triangular cooperation information will contribute to assessing its potential for the achievements of the SDGs, while strengthening management, planning, and resource orientation processes. Progress should be made in instances like peer review mechanisms, and the cooperation countries of the South do not accept to be subjected to the same monitoring and responsibility that demands of the traditional cooperators. Fifth, develop monitoring and evaluation systems focusing on impact as well as processes and allowing both quantitative and qualitative metrics. The absence of these mechanisms makes it impossible to have accurate and comparable information and data related to the contribution that this kind of cooperation made to development. 6. Improve the coordination of South-South cooperation within the United Nations. UN system may assume a dual role, on one hand as a support platform for institutional construction and capacity building through projects and programs adapted to the specific needs of each developing country. On the other, it could be an ideal facilitator to promote synergies in South-South and triangular cooperation. We strongly believe that BAPA plus 40 will be a great occasion to reach a multilateral consensus that will allow international community to boost the quantity, reach, and quality of SS&T cooperation initiatives. That's why we invite the multiple actors of the international scenario to take part in this process and to make BAPA plus 40 the driving force in strengthening South-South cooperation. By further promoting multilateralism, regional integration, and collective pursuit of sustainable development. Argentina, as the chair of the conference, believes that it will be a unique opportunity to consider the lessons learned in the last 4 decades, to reach a deeper understanding of the BAPA message of 1978 in the current international context, and to promote new commitments that translate into final action-oriented document, into a final-oriented document capable of establishing an adequate and inclusive environment for the achievement of the 2030 agenda without leaving no one behind. Thank you so much to this daily process, and thank you for the organizers of the meeting for giving us this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency. Now I have great pleasure in inviting Shri T.S. Tirumurthy, Secretary, Economic Relations in Ministry of External Affairs.
Ambassador Dr. Mohan Kumar, Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, distinguished dignitaries on the dais, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to attend the inaugural of the Delhi Process 4 on South-South and Triangular Cooperation as we celebrate the Buenos Aires Plan of Action's 40th anniversary. I felicitate the RIS for taking this important initiative. We are living in a world where everything is being reduced to monetary terms. For many developing countries, predictable financing is survival. Their commitment to meet their obligations flows from such financing being made available to them. Their commitment to their people for socio-economic development flows from such financing. That was being provided, though in a much reduced quantum of late, by the North. However, the North has suddenly taken note of, not all of it for altruistic reasons, what they see as the growing development cooperation between the global South. They see the need to reduce this South-South cooperation to monetary terms by following the same accounting and other templates that they are used to. And this is precisely where we have a problem. Growing South-South cooperation is becoming critical in bolstering the productive capacities of developing countries and has impacted the international developmental landscape positively. It has been able to act as the fulcrum around which several sustainable linkages beyond G to G as well have been made, whether in trade or investment or MSMEs or science and technology or in a range of other areas. Against these success stories of the global South, we have to juxtapose the growing reluctance of the North to shoulder its own financial and other responsibilities, which is becoming increasingly apparent when meeting the climate change obligations under UNFCCC or in assisting the realization of the SDGs. We are also not in favor of dilution of ODA or the growing emphasis on private funding, whose motivations are quite different. In the face of such a situation, the global South has had to come up with its own paradigm, its own principles for South-South cooperation in order to clearly distinguish the two. Naturally, there is no single universal template for South-South partnership, and there should not be. Each country has its own priorities, and we need to fully respect that. For us, South-South cooperation is a manifestation of solidarity of the South to promote sustainability, national well-being, and self-reliance. Consequently, it is imperative that this cooperation is determined by the countries of the South, guided by the principles of respect for national sovereignty, national ownership and independence, equality, sharing, non-conditionality, demand-driven, non-interference in domestic affairs, and for mutual benefit. Accordingly, our approach to development cooperation has always been voluntary in nature. And in this compact, which I have just outlined, it goes without saying that when such development assistance results in indebtedness of a developing country or infringes on their sovereignty, then it cannot be South-South cooperation. India's approach has always been sensitive to the needs and requirements of our development partners and has never resulted in any indebtedness or disruption of their economies. Friends, foreign ministers of India, Brazil, and South Africa recently adopted IPSA declaration on South-South cooperation in Pretoria in June this year. This declaration enunciates key principles of South-South cooperation. Solidarity and spirit of sharing inter alia are listed as primary motivations. During his recent visit to Africa, in his address to the Ugandan Parliament, Prime Minister Modi outlined 10 guiding principles for our engagement with Africa, covering the entire gamut of our strategic partnership. These have generated tremendous enthusiasm among our African partners, and our development cooperation in Africa is one of the largest. Establishment of the BRICS New Development Bank and Contingent Reserve Arrangement have been major achievements of the Global South towards global economic and financial governance. The pioneering IPSA Fund for Poverty and Hunger Alleviation, partnering the UN system, the UNOSCC, has met with success. It has been able to identify replicable and scalable projects in the fight against poverty and hunger and take up 27 projects in 15 developing countries. we have established the India UN Development Fund to take our South-South engagement even further. However, while we have the clamor from the North for bringing this growing South-South cooperation within their accounting and other templates, on the other hand, there is no movement to address the matter of reform of multilateral institutions and institutions of global governance to acknowledge this growing role of the global South, especially in development partnership. In his meeting with BRICS leaders in South Africa last month, Prime Minister Modi pointed out that while we do not support the growing unilateralism and protectionist tendencies of the day, at the same time, we cannot go back to status quo on multilateralism and of the current international world order. He called for reformed multilateralism around which the global South can coalesce. Reform should go hand in hand with acknowledgement of the rising South. Therefore, friends, the discussion and debate you are having now has the potential to influence a much larger debate on the nature of multilateralism itself and the international order. While welcoming your efforts to flesh out the principles and build on the theoretical perspectives and empirical realities, I would guard against coming up with a well-meaning but restrictive template which may constrict rather than facilitate South-South cooperation. Kindly capture its diversity of forms, modalities, and practices. South-South cooperation has traditionally been an important pillar of India's foreign policy in development, defense and security, health, science and technology, education, etc. And through our iTech program, scholarships and fellowships, capacity building, lines of credit, grants, etc. It will only continue to strengthen as we reach out to our development partners in our neighborhood, Africa, the Arab world, small island states, Southeast Asia, and beyond. Triangular and South-South cooperation can only supplement international obligations to developmental assistance. India will be happy to partner countries if countries from North and other parts of the world wish to join in providing assistance to our developing country partners. The Prime Minister's initiative of the International Solar Alliance is an example of how South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation can coexist for a better world. To conclude, I'm happy to note that the network of Southern think tanks, NEST, which is housed at RIS, is also engaged in advancing South-South cooperation. I'm confident your consultations over the next 2 days will help to shape the Southern narrative and the approach to the second UN high-level conference on South-South cooperation, the BAPA plus 40 conference, taking place next March in Buenos Aires. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I must assure you that we would be working on different dimensions and the plurality and heterogeneity that South-South cooperation brings in. In fact, there is a full session on this very theme. I would also like to bring to your attention in the agenda, we have tried to capture this dynamics at the sectoral level. So agriculture, health, and development finance have been captured. Now, friends, the moment has come. I have great pleasure in introducing our esteemed speaker today to inaugurate this conference, Her Excellency Ms. Maria Fernando Espinazo Garcias, the President-elect of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly. Before I invite her, I would request my chairman, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, to present her the bouquet of flowers from our side. She also met our civil society on Saturday at Delhi Heart, particularly those who are working on sustainable development goals. She has great interest in poetry, and she is an essayist. She has also contributed in strengthening Ecuador's civil society, and I here acknowledge the presence of the Ambassador of Ecuador here this morning. I now have great pleasure in inviting Her Excellency to address us with her inaugural address.
Well, good morning, Mr. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, Chairman of RIS, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General of IRS, Mr. Jorge Chediak, Director of the UN Office of South-South Cooperation, Your Excellency Mr. Daniel Chuburru, Ambassador of Argentina to India, Mr. Sri Tirumurti, Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, Professor Amitav Asharga, Distinguished Professor of the American University, and allow me to also acknowledge the presence of the Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, a dear friend, and also Ambassador Hector Cueva, Ambassador of Ecuador to India, and of course, good morning to all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me, at the outset, start by thanking the government and the people of India for the hospitality